When you put these things together, back in the day, it's 1979, I was in front of this organization, this group. I want to tell you again, thank you for letting me do this again. I was a much younger man and much probably a lot more nervous then than I am now, so you don't care. I call these the mini-banjos, the mini...
can you be able to read?
I can read this. I can read this when I get lost.
Okay, you got enough light to see.
I'll be good. Thank you for that. That's exactly.
Not enough?
You're good.
We're off good here. Looks like we're gonna get. I actually had a pointer right there. All right, now, this is a picture I took in the basement of my home. My wife and I bought a home in 2005, and we were lucky enough to have a work area down in the basement that we converted into a workshop. And I was very fortunate to have the place. Again, there's, if you counted them, I think there's only 9 there. And there were a box. That box was marked 12. I had only 11 good ones that I could put together and maneuver. But they didn't look like this. They started out in the cardboard box and they were empty cases. I'm trying to do it this way. Let's see, how am I supposed to make it change? Right there.
The ring on the side, is it not worked in? Doesn't appear to be.
Yeah, a little bit of story.
Manually.
What, sir?
I guess we can do it manually.
Well, I've been able to change it, but now it is. I can't steal it. It's okay. You can go to slide 2.
Okay, go back on the left side.
No?
He's gonna have to do it with the laptop.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to.
I can change them for you.
All right. I'll just click at you.
Yeah.
Thank you. My father was born in 1913, and his mother and they had quite a relationship in as much as she just thought that he was her little smart baby, and he was a little bit of a prolific kid. He read early. He became very avid reader and was considered a genius in school. He had about a 6th grade education, but he died early in 1975. But her picture in here represents something. This was taken in Medicine Lodge where he was born. He's about 3 years old. They moved to Wichita in about 1917, 1918. And he watched them build the Orpheum Theater downtown as a young man. Went to this movie there. Said he read all the books in the library. And he later started a business. But he was very eccentric. He was had a vision. He knew what he wanted to do. He was one of those kind of type A guys, and if he didn't like it, you knew it. Even as a young man, I was told. Next place. He was able to get involved with an apprenticeship program at 2 different companies and worked at Beechcraft in the 30s after he'd run a wheelbarrow to move the Ackerman Island up to McLean Boulevard. He met a lot of people that way in his 20s. But this is a picture of 1944 inside his first machine shop on Douglas. That was a alleyway actually between 2 buildings, and they built a ceiling above it, and they allowed power. And this was his company that some of these people. My dad's in the back there with the in the black shirt. This building flooded in 1944, and they sought higher property, and they were lucky enough to move to a place over on West Maple. Next slide, please. My granddad, also the same name, August Blanchat, was a stone cutter and stone mason, and he went to Silverdale, Kansas, and brought all this rock over and hand cut it and set it and built this building. It actually built it in 2 sequences, first the east side and then the west side. This ran along Maple Street. He was 65 years old when he completed it. My dad and his brother owned the company jointly, and that's why it says Blanchat's. No apostrophe. That's on purpose because there were 2 owners. Next picture. Here's a picture of my father in our home. He's obviously reading, one of his most wonderful hobbies, and he's reading horology and horological jewelry. And so he was already voraciously trying to devour all the information about clocks long before this. But these pictures, I can tell you, were from the age of him and my little sister Roseanne, who's in attendance. This is probably about 1954. Next picture, please. Here's a picture of Dad and Mom, and they married, and Dad was 31. At this time, they had 4 children. Later, Lisa was added to the bunch in 1959. But we figured that this, when looking at Rosie's picture in her countenance there, I'm pretty sure that she's about 2, unless you want to argue with me on that one, Rose. I'm thinking this is 1954 as well. So the pictures and roll in the slide that I took this from, next slide please, were of the family and the clocks. Now I've jumped forward now to 1977 to give you an idea of the campus that I grew up on. Our family lived in this house here. Our woodworker, Elmer Herpelsheimer, he worked in this wood workshop here. And if you ever watched the New Yankee Workshop with Norm, it already existed in Wichita, Kansas, right there, guys. It was there in the early 50s. All right, across the street was, right here is the stone building that Granddad built. But this campus, which took pretty much half the whole block, it represented a residence here and a residence here. My family grew up across the street from each other. So we had a machine company with 100 people working here, making airplane parts of all sorts. And we had our house here, me and my 4 sisters, and my granddad and my grandmother, my aunt, and several animals. I'll just spare you the details, but this is where all the activity went. All the parts are made for the number 5s in these buildings. But in this one right here, all of the wood cabinetry, all these cases, were built, numbered, finished, lacquered, hand rubbed, wrapped up into plain brown wrapper, and sat starting in the early 1950s. We believe that the smaller of the 3 sizes were done first. Again, we discovered all of them after Dad had died in 1975. Next slide, please.
I might just mention that I grew up a block south of this south building.
Yes, you were familiar with the smell of the place,
Yeah, so,
along with everything else.
so
That's right, that's right.
grew up a block south of
Now, now they worked real hard. They worked 6 days a week commonly. So it was very common for the post-war and during the war, of course. Dad worked throughout the war. His brother went to our Navy, and I think that was some of the conflict that took place back later. I won't go much in detail. But here's a picture of Elmer Herpelsheimer on a really successful catfishing excursion over to the Neosho River. We did this several times, but this is one of the few pictures I've got of the man. And he was well respected. He could do anything with wood, and at different times he'd make hand tools out of cherry wood and give them to my father for Christmas presents. Although he was getting paid for those, I always thought that was interesting. Those were Christmas presents. Okay, next slide, please. And that's a picture of Arthur Jack Brown. AJ worked at the shop in the late 50s. He's an exceedingly intense man. This is how he smiled right here. And Jack this is at the Courtney Davidson, one of our summer picnics, and he was very instrumental. He finished those parts that we put those movements together back in the 70s. He helped me assemble those and watched it and gave me direction on how to get those running and make them, fortify them and learn how to massage them and keep them running, because they were all unique. Each one of them was a different personality. And he was a very helpful man. So I have to have him in this collection of names and people. Next slide, please. Inside the shop, Dad had a lot of his clocks that he'd collected. In the background here, our jig board room, it's not so much the part or the machine or the guy, although all 3 of those are exceedingly important. That's how we made a living. But up on the wall is the Howard and Davis number 1. And Dad just had it hanging up there on the wall. Just it's 9 o'clock, about time for break. And they were in every one of the buildings, all throughout the shop. Of course, they were all over the house, but it was part of the fabric there. It was common. Next page, please. I'm unfortunately wasn't that serious. This is a picture of me in my 20s, and I didn't work that hard at that moment and that time. I really wasn't into clocks. I thought that life was just, you know, I was not really a flower child, but pretty close. And it was about 3 years after this that my dad died suddenly, and my whole idea of what kind of changed. And I was able to kind of get my idea of I could finish these things, because they were all just these empty cases. There was over 50, there was over 60 of them laying about in the house, or in that garage in that workshop behind our house. Next place. So back to 1954, Dad had these pictures made with the family, and here's a bookcase. Maybe some of those books are in that shelf, in that group that you got there, because I gave some of these to our friends Paul and Ursula Mesker. But this particular clock, we think, is the one that my grandmother had, which now my sister owns. This is the first one of the ones like Jim has. It's got the engraved dial that's silver plated, and it's got the battery operated movement, which I did bring. I actually brought the movement to show if somebody wants to have a look at it as for show and tell. We had a lot of trouble with that movement, and they had to elect to go with a different kind of design that nobody could really find one that would fit because it was so small and confined. But my old man was very interested in the banjo design, so much that he had several boxes of Zippo lighters and Zippo rules with the banjo clock engraved on it. He would just give those away. I do not have any of them. I'm sad. I think that all of my sisters might have had one. She's got one. Okay, we'll talk later.
Tape measure.
Really? You've got a tape measure?
Yeah, I've got a tape measure too.
But no.
Well, we'll talk later.
We'll talk later.
Next slide, please. Anyway, so I got a phone call from this man sitting right here, from Scott Child, saying, I picked up a clock. It's like the one that you've been telling me about. It's from the Texas show, I think it was. And he says, come to the shop. So I've zipped over there, and here is this. It's Dad's. And a close-up, next slide, please. A close-up shows it is from Dad's, but it's got the wind hole. It has been adapted, adaptation. It's been retrofitted, whatever you want to call it. And this guy was what we were talking about. So somebody had made the decision. This battery outfit doesn't work so well. They were having problems finding parts. They would corrode, deteriorate. They came in, if it was in good working order. I think they may have resilvered and redone the dial, but still they did a wonderful job, and it gave me impetus. And of course, Scott, hey, we can find you. So the look was on, the hunt was on. We're going to find a movement. So we had a case size. We knew how big it had to be. We were going to have to find one that was going to fit. Next slide, please. So in the process of Scott letting me know I'm going to find one, I think I know where some are. I borrowed my sister's clock, which actually was the one sitting on the shelf 2 slides ago. This is the one that my grandmother had, and Dad had given it to her in the early 50s, 1954. She had it for 20 years and died in 1974. That day he gave it to my sister. Again, it didn't run very well. She had it looked at. That's the movement we have right here. She had trouble with it, but it sat on the wall. She was very proud of it. So I asked her for it, and I said, let me have, can I please? And she let me take it apart. And so we did some measurements, and then I was lucky enough to have the help of Mr. Clinton Brown, who's not able to attend tonight. I hope I can give him a copy of the video tonight to show him we do appreciate what he did, but he was able to make some measurements, and he knew what size we had to go for and how we had to make some adjustments to provide for a movement should we find one. Well, next page, please. I got the phone call from Scott Childs, and here it was. He had a box of these. I believe it is a German-made. It's got a stamped name on it, I believe, out of Pennsylvania. It's a 7-day or 8-day movement. It's key wind. Normally it would be set in a vertical with the wind at underneath 12. And I was insistent, like the other clocks, to go ahead and make it over here around 2 o'clock and tilt it to movement. Now, what we did have to do, though, because of its height and its thickness, we had to create a sub base. So this is where Clinton Brown came in, and he says, I think I can make a sub base for that we can attach on the back and then have a certain kind of drilled hole and threaded hole, and then retain it from the back side. So he created the I call it plexiglass, but it's a different kind of material. It's much tougher. We had to put an extra little aperture here that allows you to go in and regulate the movement. Next slide, please. So we're going. We got the movements. Clinton Brown has made the plastic case, he's made them all, he's fitted them all. We did a kind of like a workshop dance. I have my stuff, he's got his, I've got work I have to do, he's got it. So he's making the plates, I'm taking the movements, and I'm doing the adjustment on the latches. I had to work on these latches on the side. None of them have been installed. And then he's making the whole positioning on the back so that this is strategically positioned in the center of the wood. Now, we assumed that all these were similar. Well, they are similar. They look almost identical, but each one's unique. So we learned a hardy lesson. Next slide, please. We learned a hardy lesson, and that was to position things with the dial last. In the process, I was able to locate a lot of the pieces that were unfinished. Again, you can see this trough that was cut here, and you can see the serial number. This is number 7. And Elmer had marked all the hardware, the door, the bezel, and the throat frame. He marked them all to match the case, and they were all together. I had to take them apart and put them back together, I'm going to say 5 or 6 times, each just throughout the process of assembly. But these little guys here, these little phosphor bronze or beryllium copper, I'm not sure, but one or the other, but a great spring material. It's probably something that good clockmakers have been using since forever. Well, I had a box of these, not quite enough, and I had to fashion some of these out of this piece of material, because I ran out of these, and that's all the material I could find. So I ended up using all that to finish the project. Again, I was very fortunate. From the first time that I had met you folks in 1979, I became a camera repairman after I left the company and worked on cameras for about 10 years. And I developed some skills with small screws, small assemblies, and very small mechanisms. And it turns out that I had learned kind of like a patience, more of a patience level to work with small things. Not a watchmaker, not by any means, but certainly this was a lot different than working on the 5s, because the hardware was simply much more miniature. Next page, please. So we got it. We've got the case. We've received the dials. Now I have a friend up in Valley Center named Mark Stearman of Stearman Aircraft, a descendant of the ones that started the aircraft factory, and he offered to make some dial plates for me. I said, well, what do you got? And he says, I've got a whole lot of aluminum in the back. I said, well, let's do it. So, of all things, instead of using zinc, which I think most dials are made of, we used aluminum, because I was convinced that we needed to put a paper dial in front of it and not do all the engraving. I just simply didn't have the time, and it was going to be exceedingly expensive. So we effectively came up with the whole size from the center, and we had it tilted for about 2 o'clock. And we were able to start the process. You had to position those so that they would fit within the closure, like we have seen both in Jim's clock. We had a tight area to work within. You see, I had the old dial there, and I have, my workshop is developed by this time into quite a level of activity. Next page, please. So in the neck piece, you can see the 7 right here. I was able to receive, after discussion that we had whether to use Tom Oberg or not, I was doubting Thomas. It really was ridiculous. This guy is wonderful. And if you think you've seen these sticks before, yes, they're probably on the bottom of one of your popsicles. I've stained them and put them in with Elmer's glue and retained them, and they work just fine. Next page, please. I did do the same thing with the bottom plate, the bottom door. The glass, the bottom glass is of import because it was such an important logo, brand, insignia, however you want to call it, Dad liked that so much that he had our new bathroom floor in the house there on All Hallows by the shop. He had that die cut and inserted into the floor, right as you sat in the bathroom doing your business. There was the logo for the Howard Banjo Club, and it's still probably there. But this is the gluing I did. I created a special kind of curve here with some plates and was able to install the pieces. Again, I've had these off and on several different times, and they're very delicate. You just can't get ahead of it. You just cannot press it. You cannot get in a hurry. Locating that screw and having it as an adjustment, it was so strategic. There's not much material. It can't be very long. It has to be the right length and at the right height. So there was a lot of tinkering that just simply doesn't show itself, that I was sweating. And I will tell you that I was doing this while the sadness of my sister had passed, and then her husband died. And it was just a struggle to be able to get these things done. But it was, sometimes I was so covered up with pain and sadness and you know, trying to heal, that it was really nice to have this thing as therapy to finish this project. Next picture, please. So the dial became the biggest unknown area that I had never ever had done anything of this nature. So you see the dials for the Banjo number 5 that we did and finished in 1979, they already were produced. I did send them over to a printer here in Wichita, and he put that chapter ring that goes around inside the numerals, and he added my father's signature, and he added Wichita, which is the same font, or very similar to the font as the Boston that's on all the Howard dials. And so we just really thought we were hot stuff by creating that. Well, I didn't have any experience with it. So now we're going to make dials. I've never made dials. Well, let's just use a computer. Well, of course, computers didn't exist as we know them in 1979, but lo and behold, 2000, the 21st century, and we can put this on our scanner, and we can make this thing exactly the size of those brass ones made in 1954. Now, we don't have to engrave all that stuff in there. We don't have to go around and painstakingly. Each one of those numerals, each one of those is a setup. Each one of them, and if you make a mistake, you throw that away and start all over. There's no automation whatsoever. These things took a whole day to engrave. So now I've got the size I want, but I still got the line, and there's deterioration and stuff. But with some software, I was able to remove the line, the circle, and I was able to remove the hole, which was in the wrong spot, and make it white. And then I could, in essence, transfer that image onto the shiny white paper. Next page, please. So here we have it. This is actually, I think this might be Jim's, but this is the very first rosewood. Did not exist. He didn't distribute or sell any of those or create any of those. There was 4 of them. I have the 4th one right here, and it's another story all by itself. But there were only 3 of them that I was able to distribute to people in the area. But this is the first one of its existence. I was so proud of having it completed. And the workshop that I worked in probably needs to be, a little bit needs to be told about that. Next picture, please. This is a real humble photograph of our basement. We were looking at a house in the neighborhood of where we wanted to kind of live, and I went down in this basement, and I just took these pictures, and we're walking through. We're going to look at them later. And we ended up buying this house. In that picture, I just hadn't done anything with this photograph until about 2 weeks ago when I put this presentation together, because I thought, this is what it looked like. And then things transition. Can I have the next slide, please? I opened the box, and here was all 12 cases. Maybe there's only 11 there. Somebody help me count there. There's 11, and the movements aren't received yet. I laid this picture out down in the workshop. I've been living there for maybe 10 years, and I showed this picture to Scott, and he goes, we gotta find those, you know. So this was, again, bugging us. But then he found the movements. We were able to get the glass made. Brown had made his plastic subplate. All those things fell in the mark. And this is what my wife had walked into. Next slide, please, in the basement. This is what
It
So-
looked like this before the clock, so.
So she's, I've been competing with her on what her Christmas looks like. This is what it looks like. So in essence, I've got my father's toolbox, my toolbox. I've got sundry things that Jack Brown, Elmer, all the Clinton Brown. I've got 2 drill presses. I've got the work area here. I've 2 vices. I literally was using all the tools up on the wall, and it was wonderful. I really felt, privileged to have this opportunity, because it's old school. I know it's old school, guys. I know that you don't get to do this very much anymore. The cloth that I had laid the clocks on, that's the same cloth that I did the same thing with all 46 of the number 5. So it was ceremonial, almost like it was on an altar. I'm sorry, there's a little Catholic in here still. So I'm at the work doing this, and I got the radio on. I'm listening to country western, and I'm doing all kinds of things that are typically atypical for me. I am not a country western kind of guy, but I just got into this and had a good time. Next picture, please. So in the process, I've got the cherry wood, I've got the rosewood, I've got the walnut cases all going. Got them up on the wall. They've all been assembled. They're all ticking. They're all needing regulation. And I've created a little method up here to be able to have it up on the, and observe them and make notes. And after a while, each one of them had a little post-it note on them as I would make my adjustments, because I wanted them to be semi-close. And it seems like everybody, they get them and they're a little different when they get them home. Next picture, please. But the one thing that we did have to do, and you can tell here, is we had to put is that a convex glass there? And we had to provide room for that longer neck, or that longer main shaft. So that actually gave it a little different, I don't know, it's just given it a little different personality. And you go all the way to the very first picture, and it's just stunning with that curved glass. It just gives it another character. Next picture, please. So here's a picture of the 3 sizes all together. We have the number 5, created in 1979. What we called a 5.5. There were only 6 of these made. They were mostly in cherry wood and a couple in rosewood, none in walnut, as I remember. There were 6 of those made, and we completed those in '86, and I did a presentation on those. They talked me into coming in, and I came in 1998. And I did a presentation for the Clock Club at that time. Again, that's the night that I met my wife. So thank you, honey, for coming along. Well, I don't know what's happening tonight, but we'll find out. So anyway, so I didn't quite have the dials fully completed on this. I just put it together to take the photograph. But they kind of represent a bulk of my adult life. Creating this is 1975, and this is 2018. Next picture, please. So in closing, I've got lots of good things I have to say about it. I have to thank a couple, 3 people at least, and Clinton Brown's not here. I hope that he can see the video of what we've explained tonight and told about on him. That he and his wife have been exceedingly helpful. He was originally just a machinist at the machine company and joined there after the Army in the early 1950s. He saw the development of all these pieces throughout his whole career. He grew to be a tool maker there. He was a very handy tool maker, and was, like I say, very instrumental in assembling the number 5 units. Then I approached him on to finish this one after Scott Childs had found those movements, and I got some, he was 85. And he was, sometimes he was real sharp, sometimes he was out to lunch, but he was still Clinton, and I knew he was okay. And I asked his wife if it was taxing him, and she said, no, this is the best thing he ever had happen. You need to let him finish it. So, God willing, he was able to, and I'm very grateful again. His health is good, but 85 is pretty, for what you have to remember in manufacturing, it's expensive too. I think Jerry Aaron I think some of the folks know Jerry. He was a contemporary friend of my father's. He got involved in the clock collecting, some of the influence of my dad on Jerry. And then he was like a big brother to me after my dad had passed, and was very helpful to keep me going, and I have to thank him for this. Now, Scott Childs, I didn't even know that he was from Wichita till a month ago. I thought you were from the East Coast or something. I mean, I thought you were a new guy there for a little while, but you proved to me that you're worth every bit of the fiber that it has to be to create, you know, keep the flow going in the business. And I'm very grateful for what you've done here. You made a huge contribution to this. All the folks here that are in your club, I gotta say thank you to you because of your interests. They make me feel like we make a difference. I don't necessarily feel like I made quite a difference. This was a project I had to finish, and I had a place to bring it to and share it with you, and I'm just happy that I can do so. I do think that that's a completion of my presentation. If there are any questions or any things you wish to ask, I brought some pieces here that I've wanted to share. One of which is it appears to be a gluing fixture that Elmer had built. This is about 65 or 70 years old, and the empty case will fit in it, but I'm not sure if you want to have a look at it. I'm still trying to figure out what it might be for, and maybe you can help me decide on that.
Your way, Ted.
On those sides. On the half size, you said you had 4 rosewood, but you only ended up with 3. How many walnut and how many cherry did you end up with?
There's 7 walnut, counting, I'm sorry, 6. There's 6 of them, counting my sister's. Let me make a reference here. No, it's right here, I think.
Oh, I thought you wanted,
6, there's 6 walnut, there's 3 cherry wood, and there's 4 of the rosewood. I've gone ahead and put a serial number on this one. Now, mind you, my life has not been, I didn't live in the same house that I've been, you know, I moved about 5 or 6 times with that cardboard box. There was one night a real bad rainstorm, and that thing just barely got saved. But part of this guy didn't, he got lost. So the doors are somewhere else.
oh, God.
We don't know where they are. I've been looking, I think, I like to dream that I'm gonna be able to find it sometime. But in the event that I don't, it's one of those difficult parts of time. But it's somewhere this thing fits down in here somehow. And I really would love to be able to finish that one, but I don't think I have the skills required to make this piece and this piece. That's missing. I do have this bottom door. So if anybody's got any magic, we need 2 more pieces to finish this one. I do have an extra movement right here that'll fit right in there. It's ready to go, but I can't.
Surely there's some, you're talking about the wood frame.
Yeah, the frame. I don't have the
Right.
frame for what would be the neck piece, and I don't have the frame for the bezel.
There's surely some woodworkers that are real, I mean, real good at that.
Has to be out of rosewood. That's hard to find.
Oh, yeah, oh, that's right, I forgot, rosewood, that's right. You told me that.
I have a name that I could give you. We have one of our Boy Scout leaders builds furniture and builds commission furniture. And one of the woods that he works with is lignum vitae. And I don't know if you've ever, that stuff is like ironwood, right? It's hard as a stone. So he has access to all those kinds of woods and just does fantastic work. I bet.
Well, we may
would
want to
love
get in
to
touch
talk
with
to
him
you.
to finish but one.
Yeah.
I just don't know how
Yeah.
the timing of that is going to be. But I've like I said, I've gone ahead and put a serial number on this, and I've done everything that I can to finish it. There's a small chance that I still have the parts within my home, but I'm just not going to spend a whole lot of energy trying to convey that. Not at this point. Any questions?
Good job.
I'm sure Mr. Price would loan you his as a sample to furnish, if you need to have something.
Yes, I owe him something before I can do that, yeah, but thank you so much, everybody.